Christina, am I good to go?
Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna put it in board docs. And to the public, and yep, it's good to go.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, welcome everyone to tonight, January 23rd, 2025, the meeting of the Legislative and Advocacy Task Force for the Hartford Public Schools. We're glad that you've joined us, and thank you to the committee members for being here tonight. Tonight, we're going to have a report on the bills that have been introduced so far that affect Hartford Public Schools and relate to our priorities. We'll have a discussion around what the legislature is planning on special education so far. Discuss thoughts on piloting an in-district program related to special education, and then just kind of open it up for anybody to discuss any new topics that you might want to talk through. Or I thought we could use this time to perhaps come up with some action plans if there's anything that folks wanted to work towards, whether it's testimony opportunities, op-ed opportunities, press conferences, and those kind of things. So just to keep the ball rolling and keep folks engaged. So with that, I will turn it over to Patrick to start off.
Great. Thanks very much, Jen, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us join your meeting. So, the legislative session has just been going for a couple weeks now. There have been, Nicole, maybe 1,000 bills introduced so far, maybe. I'm sure we're on our way to 3 or 4, something like that. So we've been spending a lot of time screening bills to see what impact they may or may not have on Harvard Public Schools. One thing to keep in mind is that the proposed bill deadline was last Friday, and proposed bills can be put in by any legislator on any topic, and many times they are broad ideas, not a lot of detail, and many of them really aren't taken up further action on, and many of them are very similar, like many bills on special education funding, many bills on ECS. So, but we've been screening things with our lens really is your priorities and how will these bills impact your priorities, number one. Number two, are there things that we didn't anticipate that are being put in legislatively, and we need to let you know about that. And finally, before I just talk about some of the priorities and the bills we've seen, the committee process is just getting underway. So the appropriations process, which is obviously very important to the schools, as well as the work of the education committee, that they're just getting underway. They're just starting to raise bills again, which is a signal by the committee what they're going to work on this session, and they're going to start drafting bills. So no public hearings coming up in the next at least week, maybe 10 days. And then, as Jen, as you had just referred, there may be opportunities to begin to weigh in on specific bills, specific topics, as drafts come out. And some of our topics are very broad, so we always have to wait for that. But there won't be any hearings in really in the next week to 10 days, I think, that we have to worry about. So looking at the 5 priorities that the task force has set out for this year, and now we're based not only on the bills we're seeing. There was a meeting with the delegation. Jen, you've had meetings up here. Superintendent attended those meetings. It was great that a number of delegation members attended in person and/or virtually. My comment there is that you've got a very engaged delegation who are really supportive of the schools, and we're all committed to doing what they can to, after having heard our priorities, to try and meet those priorities with legislation, with action. I think it's pretty clear that there's great unanimity in the legislature that fully funding of the ECS formula is going to take place. They are on track, and that is not going to change. And I think, Superintendent, you've been hearing that from the organizations that you take part in. So, good news is there were years when that wasn't going to be the case, and fighting to get that, and so it's going to happen. It'll be fully funded. It doesn't answer all of the struggles of the schools, but that's good to know. So, but there are a number of bills that have been introduced that are saying, continue it, make sure it's happening. No one has to do anything. You know, a lot of these proposed bills, I think it will be fully funded. We haven't seen a bill that would change. So the second priority, sustain the cap on mandated tuition. That would require action, taken away. We haven't seen anything on that. Not necessarily expecting. And we may see something, but I do believe that your delegation will be very strong on this issue. We will make sure it remains priority, but we haven't seen any language or any bills addressing that topic yet. So that would bring us to the third priority, and which seems to be the most interesting and we see most legislative activity on special education funding. The excess cost grant, as well as introducing a special education factor into the ECS formula. There are, gosh, Nicole, I don't know how many bills we've seen on special education funding, maybe 20, all in favor of meeting the need. I think it's safe to say, Leslie and Jen, that in our meeting with the delegation, there was this coming out of the meeting, a strong feeling that if the districts that have significant interests in more funding do their job, support their legislators, that this is something that can be accomplished this year. So I think we've heard positive things, but it's a long way to go. The governor will introduce his budget in forget that next time on February 5th. We'll see what's in there, but there and I think that if I'm correct, that number, the number that would require the appropriation would be about 90 million, I think, to address that issue statewide, which is a big number. But I do think this is where I think we will want the task force to concentrate their efforts. So I'll leave that to you all to decide, but I think you could have the most impact on that particular issue. And so those are the priorities. In some things we did talk about some specific. I think that's actually on in the agenda, Jen, in terms of any of the pilot industry stuff, and I'll let you, Mr. Lieutenant, talk about that. And I can give just a brief overview, and Nicole, please jump in as you feel necessary on the budget, the governor's budget. It will be introduced on February 4th. That begins a long process. And Nicole, you might want to just talk about the appropriations process and opportunity for the task force to weigh in that process.
But you might want to mute me because I can
Okay.
hear a
You're
lot of
picking me up?
stuff. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Patrick's headphones are very good and they will pick up me talking and then it will sound very weird to you guys. Yeah. So as Patrick mentioned, the budget will be presented by Governor Lamont, his proposed budget on February 5th. And at that time, there will begin a process where the agencies, including SDE, will come and present their proposed budget for the year to the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that has final legislative approval on the appropriation side of the budget. Typically what happens is, and I believe it's going to be probably the second and third week of February. We haven't had final dates yet. As soon as those are finalized, we'll share with you, but it'll be sometime in that time period. The agency will come and present their budget to the Appropriations Committee. And then on the same day, at a later time, members of the public can also provide their input. So in the past, Dr. Torres Rodriguez has provided testimony in person, has provided virtual testimony, has provided written testimony. It can often be a little, I would say, difficult to get the entire Appropriations Committee in a room. So, and there are a lot of people who will want to have something to say. So it can often feel, I would say, it's a bit of an overwhelming process in the sense that there will be a lot of people with their comments. It's still really important that we get them in, but I do think there will be other opportunities for folks to engage in addition to that. But if members want to, our advocacy team members want to, write testimony or sign up to at least testify virtually, that can often fit a little bit better in your schedules. After that, I will just briefly, Patrick, talk about the workshop process. After that, the agencies will meet again with subcommittees. And those subcommittees, there's one for education, and that subcommittee will sit down, and I would call that like a little bit more of the like nitty gritty back and forth discussions. Often the appropriations committee will have questions for the agency and they will fill those out. That will probably happen like later in February into March. And then really after that, it will be a lot of kind of behind the scenes budget negotiations until we get closer to the end of session. There won't be an opportunity to engage in that workshop session, but there will be opportunities, like I said, to engage the education committee as well, where you'll have a little bit of a smaller audience and it's a little bit more, I would say, like focused on specifically education issues. You're on mute because I made you mute. Sorry.
Thanks, Nicole. I also did want to point out that as we spoke in the last meeting, I believe that there is now a select committee on special education, not part of the appropriations process, but Representative Miriam Khan is going to be co-chair of that. She had attended the meeting with the delegation. Obviously, she was very interested working with Jennifer on and want to make sure that Harvard's voice on special education was heard and that we were active participants. Before we leave legislation, I did want to point out one thing that we also try to closely pay attention to are bills that are introduced by the Hartford delegation now in terms of education issues or funding issues. And there were just two that we would want you to know about because our best champions are the delegation. Representative Hall and Khan introduced a bill asking for a pilot program to provide driver ed to all Hartford High School students if they're interested. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll let you know how that goes. And Senator Farah has introduced a bill for a pilot program as well to increase funding for after-school programs at Hartford. Pretty broad language, not really sure what specifically that is. Superintendent, I don't know if he's reached out to you about that yet. We haven't spoken to him. Assuming it's involving the schools, I don't know. But we will speak to him soon and run that to ground. But those are the only two that kind of jumped out at me. Obviously, with Senator McCrory as chair of the education committee, he will be involved in all of these things. Very involved, and he was at the meeting as well this week. So we're feeling very confident that you have a very engaged delegation and are going to be really at your side this session.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So I think the next thing, was there more on special ed, Patrick, or are we moving on?
No, unless Jennifer or Liz had anything to add to maybe more substantively than our political take on it. We just know that there's a major effort to do it. I'll leave it. We wouldn't have anything to add from our piece.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What when you mentioned that there were some bills introduced around adding that special ed factor to the ECS formula, and that I think you said a number of about 90 million as the projected cost of that. Do you have any documentation or backup sort of how they're coming to that number?
I don't at this time, Paul, but really good question. And we'll see what we come up with. I assume it's Office of Fiscal Analysis has done something, but I haven't seen it. But I'm sure it exists.
Okay.
So we will track that down for you.
Yeah, I just want to be able to figure out how to translate to like what would that mean in Hartford.
Of course.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Councilman Hernandez.
Thank you. Patrick, I have a question. So, out of all those bills that you read, that you went through, did you see a lot of language that spoke to any of these being conditional to the guardrails being eased or getting rid of them? Like, is there any correlation between the two? Because I mean, that's a separate conversation, but if that conversation has to be priority in order for us to get this other piece, I wanted to kind of take the temperature to see the correlation between the two conversations.
Sure. Yeah. So I do have an answer for that. I think that I don't think the debate over the guardrails will impact ECS, the cap, or the special education money. I believe because if you probably know, the budget, if nothing else happens on the guardrails, because the spending cap increase is tied to inflation or the last 5 years of average income in the state, there's going to be almost $1 billion more in the biennial budget because the spending cap will rise by virtue of existing law, right? So there is additional money now. That's not a lot of money with a lot of people looking for it. But I don't think the guardrail debate today, right now, I think that there is a sense that they can do some of these things without that. I do believe that there will likely be some change, small change. And I guess I'm going on a limb here to the guardrail. There are a lot of people that don't want that, but I think at the end of the day, there may be. I think the biggest fear at the legislature for let's say ECS or certainly for the special education piece is what's going to happen in Washington. And if there is a huge cut in Medicaid, if there are huge cuts in federal education money, which is quite possible, that changes everything and all bets are off. And so they're waiting, we talked to leaders and that's one of their biggest concerns, something that they really have no control over at this point.
So in any conversation that I may have, bringing the guardrail conversation is not strategically sound. It wouldn't be wise for me to tie one thing with the other, because in fact, there may be a lot of opportunities that don't necessarily correlate one with the other. So why me bring it up if maybe there's not even necessary? Is that so strategically the best way to go about it? Avoiding that part
Yeah,
of the conversation?
I would say that it would be okay to bring that up because there may be competing interests. I would say that if I think there is, again, a likelihood that they will modify them slightly or come up with another solution for additional money, I would suggest that that we'll feel much better if there's going to be additional money outside of current budget constraints, right? So I would say that no, you should talk about that, but it's not say unless you do some of the guardrails, we're not going to get special ed. That's not the conversation. But the conversation is there's a lot of competing interests, and there's a large surplus, and this really is a time when there's a lot of needs out there. Certainly, Harvard Public Schools is one of them. So I would think you could still discuss that.
Thank you.
But I want to emphasize if in 3 months there is a massive cut from Washington, all of this gets turned upside down.
Dr. Rodriguez or Dr. Hoffman, do you have anything to add related to what we were just talking about?
I know we part of the meeting that we had, we did talk about the special education potential pilots. So I know that's further on the agenda, so I can hold on that, but I just wanted to make the connection that we did also talk about those. And I thought that there was receptiveness to understanding what that would look like for us here.
Walton?
Good evening, everyone. This question is for Patrick. Do we have a contingency plan in case everything is turned upside down by what the funding looks like from the Fed? Have we explored a contingency plan?
No. I mean, I don't think people were all that focused on it. When I say people up here, until the inauguration, and as we are hearing, as daily what's coming out of Washington is that the administration is making good on a number of the things that they promised, and so I think that has raise the level of concern. So in terms of Harvard Public Schools contingency, or are you asking, is there a contingency at the, the governor and the legislature? We'd be back to, budget budgeting in a very different way. Whether people have talked about, what could happen is the governor could declare a fiscal emergency, and then that changes what you can do, I believe, with the rainy day fund, with the guardrails. And again, no one's there yet, but we have heard that as, that's a break the glass moment, right? Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Just a quick follow-up. Should we, I know we shouldn't focus on, and maybe we're being a little proactive in that, but should we explore at least this group or portions of it?
Well, I guess is that a question for how the district would deal with cuts, which would be something I would answer. If that's what it is, yeah, that would be.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Walton, that we are still going to go through our process of developing a budget. And we have to think about multiple scenarios, right? So if our revenue doesn't change, then we'll think about, right, what are the steps to mitigate the projected anywhere from $25 to $30 million annual deficit that we face. I don't know if that's what you're wondering about, but as we finalize the strategic plan and, right, knowing that the current budget outlook forecast is that we are, looking to start next year with no additional staff, for example, and already we were projected to have a deficit. I think that's where, we'll have to come together to make really challenging, decisions yet again.
Thank you.
Mr. Tatum, I saw that you put something in the chat. Do you want to talk about that any further? Be a place where you can talk. Okay. All right. With that, Dr. Torres Rodriguez, do you want to talk about the piloting and district programs for special ed briefly?
Yes, and I know that Dr. Hoffman is on the call as well. And I want to preface by saying that these are pilots that we've, not explored beyond our internal conversations. And essentially, it's ideally to have additional funds to expand some of the programming that we already have, right? We know that with the current programming in district, we save anywhere from $20 to $30 million, right? If we had to send these students out, right, that is what the cost would be. And so, we have, for example, our iGoals program, right? And could that be an opportunity to expand in additional parts of the city? The same thing with our transitional program for our older students. And perhaps there's an opportunity to not just expand internally, but perhaps, a couple of our neighboring towns would want to partner. And the same, right? We heard from, for example, Representative Khan, that there are specific districts that have an interest and a track record, for lack of a better word, of specific programming, right? Whether it be like an alternative education program, and we could potentially partner to benefit from that program as well. There is a program that we do not have, but we do have staff that has expertise, and that is a school avoidance program, which we know that there are students that have that specific need. And so that is another pilot that we could consider. All of that rests on a foundation of having a full complement of staff. And so hoping that, right, with the new contract that we're having to start, starting next year, that will have a stronger foundation for us. But I do know, hearing it directly from members of the delegation and the committee, the special education special committee, that there is an interest in pilot programming. So just wanted to raise it here. Dr. Hoffman, I don't know if there's anything else that I've missed. No.
Could I ask you a question on that? I just want to understand when you were talking about having additional funds with this pilot program, are you looking for additional funds to the full budget, or are you talking about additional funds being saved from not doing outplacements?
No, actually, this would be additional funding through the legislator,
Through the legislature.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because, right, we might need to have additional furniture when we're thinking about, right, eye goals, right? We have students sometimes that have, complex needs. We know that the number of students that are being that require autism support services continues to increase at a very rapid rate. And so we know that those are, classrooms that have to be retrofitted very differently. And so perhaps we need an infusion of funding for the spaces, and then, right, to support staffing potentially, Carol, with, professional learning, things like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm all for such pilots. I think that's a great idea because we do need it. We have that high need of kids and we can't afford to outplace them all. And opening up more classrooms in Hartford becomes more of the least restrictive environment for students as well. So it's a win-win if we get the money, right? It's all about the money. Okay.
Any other questions on special education? Great. So the last item was just to kind of open up the floor, to see if anyone else had any other ideas they wanted to talk about since the last time we, gathered, and also just to see if anybody had any ideas on next steps as a committee as well.
Chairperson, I'm sorry. I
course.
can give an quick overview of the recommendations from the Special Education Task Force.
Oh, yeah, please do. Yeah.
And several of us were part of that task force. And I guess there were, say, 4 buckets, if you will, the recommendations. One was heavy emphasis on staff shortages and the fact that, right, that is the number one issue for us. And so some of the recommendations were to broaden pathways to certification for special education teachers, paraeducators, including removing some of the existing barriers. And we here in Hartford Public Schools have seen the impact of those barriers being at least temporarily suspended. I see Miss Williams on the call, and I think we're over 45 paraeducators that have been added, Miss Williams, since we were, had the flexibilities softened a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're probably reaching over 50, 52 at this point because of the flexibility we've had with the parapro exam and supporting our staff to do that.
That's an outstanding number considering that we started in December. And so, right, the task force is also recommending that. There was a lot of conversation about reviewing the paraeducator standards, and for the CSDE, the State Department of Ed, to review eligibility, the state assessment, and then lots of focus on funding, which aligns to some of the conversations we were having here, increasing special education weighting in the ECS formula, including specifically a 50% weight based on the number of special education students, which would ensure that districts like ours with higher needs receive, right, added funding. Adjusting, which we heard here, adjusting the ECS formula for inflation, reforming the excess cost grant, which is the challenge that we have, especially when we outplace, to Carol's point earlier, when we outplace students and we have to pay, there's the gap that we always have to, make up for. There were recommendations relative to inequities, for example, increasing funding for parent supports and places like the Connecticut Advocacy Center to enhance the support that they provide for parents, and then to enhance partnerships with advocacy centers to work with school systems directly. A lot around effectiveness of programming and incentivizing, we just talked about this, incentivizing therapeutic programs, creating pilot programs, and incentivizing districts to actually create pilots to avoid those out-of-district placements. Lot of content in the report about the out-of-district placements and recommendation for a work group to develop like a model contracts for placing students, given that like right now there's a whole lot of approaches and contracts that districts engage in for out-of-district placements. Transparency was another one, a recommendation, transparency relative to the tuition rates, and calling on the State Department of Education to collect information and make it transparent so that districts can then make better and informed decisions. There were several other recommendations around MTSS. For us, we've heard the terminology, the multi-tiered systems of support, which provide that like foundational tier 1 support for students, and reviewing some of those guidelines to make sure that that districts are still in alignment with best practice and research. And then there was one, there were so many, I'm trying to recall them in my head. One of them that I was really excited about, which is about micro-credentialing for paraeducators to support, right, their career enhancement as well. So lots and lots of great ideas. The report, I don't know, Pat and Nicole, if you know what the initial legislation, if it was right for this report and the task force, we give the report. I don't know what's next.
Yeah, a specific question too I would ask is there anything in the legislative proposals that addresses those pathways to certification? I know that came up last year. So is there anything, Patrick, that's this year that's addressing certification and trying to make it easier for people to enter the field?
I think that will definitely be a priority for the education committee, but many of the bills right now have no language in them. So they're just concepts. But I think I think you're correct, Carol, that it was a priority last year, and I think they'll continue to look at that. And we will obviously track that and monitor that, and we can provide you guys an update. And within a couple of weeks, there'll be some more details in those bills, and I think that will help. Go ahead,
that would be great. I did have the opportunity to speak at a forum where Doug McCrory was sitting, and make a point of saying education is the only profession that requires the hoops that we have to jump through to get in. You know, if you're a lawyer, you take one exam, you get in, and you're done. And you don't have to go from initial to provisional to professional. Like, we have all those layers. And although I know last year they talked about reducing it to just 2, it still is, it's a tough one, because again, we are the only profession where somebody can face losing their profession if they don't stay on top of that recertification process. And it's something we certainly talk to a lot of people about on a regular basis, making sure that they do what they got to do to get the State Department of Ed to recertify them. Whereas most licenses are a matter of paying. You pay to keep your license up to date. Ours is a little bit more in depth, that requires our employer to verify that we've done a good job. So, there is a lot of components to keeping people certified, and we certainly want to make it as easy as possible to get people into this profession. So I thank you, Nicole, for that, and I look forward to hearing any updates as these bills start getting fleshed out.
Yeah. And I think, Nicole, Leslie, I think there was supposed to be a press conference today releasing the final recommendations. it disappeared off the calendar. At least that's what Nicole said this afternoon, right?
Yes,
It was this.
go ahead. Sorry, Nicole.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, it was on the calendar for 9 a.m. this morning, and then it wasn't here. I don't know where it was, but I don't know if it was canceled or what.
Yeah, there was a request, as we were informed, a request from the chair of the special education, the new committee. I guess they had something
That's-
else going on and they
Oh.
wanted to be available and, so be supportive of
Yeah, sure.
kind of like the receipt of the report.
Yeah, so that's the select committee, and so some of the recommendations would go through there, some would go through probably the education committee. But
You might.
so there will be bills that will be put in, raised by the committee. So the select committee will likely raise bills if they can.
They did clarify at their first meeting that the bills will go, if they have special ed bills, it'll go through that select committee and then over to the education committee. Everything that goes through special ed has to go through education as well. And then it would, if it has a fiscal cost, off to the budget committee, which obviously
Thanks.
it would have.
Thank you for that. Any additional thoughts today? Anything? Open the floor up to anybody. It sounds like there will be a lot to do maybe in the second or third week of February and going forward. So definitely look forward to being in touch with folks and figuring out ways to engage everyone in whatever way you're most comfortable with. I know I said press conference earlier, but that would be my least favorite thing I would want to do. So, but hopefully there are folks that want to do that and write testimony and however we want to engage. But please keep us posted too. If there's a way you definitely want to engage, and that means that you want to work directly with someone, either board or with our folks from Capital Strategies, that however you feel most comfortable engaging, please keep us posted so that we know who to reach out to as we move forward in this process. So,
And did you want to say something, Patrick? I was just
I
gonna say
just
I'm
only-
happy.
Go ahead. Only because Jennifer just mentioned press conferences. I should have said this earlier. I imagine the task force was aware of superintendent's participation in the mayors, the 5 mayors press conference. I think it was sometime last week. Everything's happening so fast up here. It was terrific. It was really got a lot of media attention. Superintendent did a great job. So it's great to spend your time to do that. Very, very strong message was sent.
Yeah, and Christina did distribute those notes from that as well with a link to watch it. So
Right.
if anyone wants that, feel free to ping us. We can send it. But I was just going to add to Chairwoman Hockenhall's point, I'm happy we will provide updates to you guys about kind of when things will be happening, so that you can also, it won't just be like you're expected to know. We will let you guys know when hearings are going to occur and kind of help you through that process. But if you are someone who already knows you want to be involved, please definitely let us know. But we'll be reaching out.
great. Well, as always, thank you all for your time and your energy. I'm really excited to continue to work with everyone here and to those watching at home. If you want to get involved, let us know. The more the merrier. We definitely want to show our support for the students that we represent and work for every single day. So we look forward to hearing from you as well. So, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Have a